Welcome to the Totally Awesome Fishing Show. Now, it's become painfully apparent to us after 300 films that there are a lot of anglers out there that do not just want to sit by a lakeside, fall asleep and waiting for an electronic buzzer to wake them up. What do they want to do? They want to catch a fish with a float from a river. Now, I've been doing this a very long time, and one of my favourite species to catch is the barbel. And when people say to me, what's your favourite method of fishing and your favourite species? It would have to be trotting with a float for barbel using a pair of thigh or chest waders. Clear water, stream of weed, sometimes you even get to see the fish come out under the stream of weed, take the bait and you see the float go under. You cannot beat it. It's the pinnacle of fishing, although it is becoming a little bit more difficult. Now, you can scale down from the barbel and you can catch a lot of other river species by using a float. It's not easy float fishing. Let's start straight out from base camp here. You cannot just, like, you could go and get a lead and a self-hooking boilie, fire it out and you got a chance of catching something and hook yourselves. Oh no, that doesn't happen in a river. With a river you have to learn the speed of the current, you've got to get the float set right, you've got to shot the float, a lot more to it really, and of course you're in constant contact with that float. If you're not, you won't catch. So let's talk a little bit about float fishing. I'm going to be using a stick float. Now, here's my float box. All you guys who are float fishermen will be holding their heads in disbelief. My floats are loose. They should not be loose. They will roll around and chip and obviously mess each other up. I got them from enormous, great big body wagglers down to stick floats. And the stick float is, as the name suggests, the shape of a stick. It has a tiny, very tiny little pip at the top because you will be putting shot below it to get it set like this, so you just barely see a tiny little piece of float. Let me show you the different types of stick floats that I use. Here's a few basic stick floats that I use. These are balsa bodied. This particular float, he says, putting his spectacles on, it says it takes 6 number 4, this one, okay, 6 number 4 shot. This would be a more traditional length of stick float. Now I'll give you a guide here. These small stick floats, say for small stream close in fishing, barely 4.5 inches long. The standard, I would call this a standard stick float, is nearly 7 inches long. So 6 to 7 inches, that one is actually, this one is 7.5 inches long. So this float would be good for slow back eddies, currents, almost under your feet type of fishing. And what happens is, as you go to hold it back in the current, and you have to hold this angle back to get the bait to go before the float, it's only good in slow currents. It won't work in a fast current. It wants it to go flat too much because it doesn't take that heavier shot. And this obviously, with a longer float, stick float like this, there's more resistance. There's more resistance for holding the float back. It won't tip up, it won't lay flat so much, which you want it vertical if you can help it. There's another one there. Now, you may notice with this one, it's what we call top and bottom. In fact, this one has no eyelet. Now, here's one, and you guys are going to see that there, that has the standard eye that you thread your line through a piece of float rubber here, down the float and out through the eye there. This one doesn't, because sometimes when you strike, it slips. You can get around it by going a loop of line through there twice, but this one, you can go top and bottom. If you can see that there, it's about as close as I can get. You can see there's a rubber here, just a rubber there, which would normally sit just about there. You want it nice and neat. So when the float's ready to go under, you're going to shot it, what we call pipping it down to about there. All you're going to see is that tiny little bit by the valve rubber. But you can also put the valve rubber down the bottom as well. That one's probably a little bit loose there because it's been on there for a while. But here's another type. To show you this one. Now this one is a more, one assumes, a refined one. Now this is called a dicky car. Sounds very pleasant, doesn't it? A dicky, I've got a dicky car there. It sounds like I've got sort of disease. It takes 5 number 4 shot. So not a lot of shot, but it is a wire stem stick. So That is going to carry some weight in there to help it actually, you know, cock level in the water like this. Hasn't got the valve rubber on the top. You can cut a piece of valve rubber, put it on the top, but also you've got a long sliding piece of valve here that comes with the float, and they built up the bottom end of the float there. I don't know if you're going to see that there. See it up near the camera there. There you can see that's like, do you know, I don't even know what it is, whipping or what it is, but there's no eyelet to it, and it's whipping, and this comes down and goes over the top of that and pinches down nice and tight. So that you would have a valve rubber at the top will stop it sliding on the line when you strike. That's the idea of that one. This one has a very, very fine tip there to shot it down. So that again would not be fast paced. That's for nice, smooth, level flowing, not swirly water. You don't want any big back eddies and swirls with that one. So that, as I say, is a sort of basic run through of the stick floats. But what you should be doing is getting yourself some valve rubbers. Now you can get float rubbers, you can just go and buy them, or you can buy the valve rubbers like this. So if you buy all these lengths of valve rubber, you can actually physically cut them down longer than you would buy one, a shop bought one. I mean, you can, as a for instance, you could put this one really on there and cut it with a pair of scissors nearly 1/2 inch, and that way you get plenty of grip on there and it won't slide. So look, you can cut at least that much off of that. And of course, different colours, they come colour coded, yellows, blues. Doesn't really matter, because don't forget the fish are never going to see this because it's, you know, up here out of the, well up above the water. But they're different diameters for different thicknesses of floats to go over the top. Like this is a bit finer, so as you can see I can work that over the top of that float. So there we go, that's the idea of the stick float. So they come small size, I'm going to say they come a small size, slow streams, close to your feet fishing, something like that. A little bit faster, smoother water, not swirly. You can use a standard stick float, which will take quite a bit of weight, you know, to get the bait down in the bottom, or you can use a wire stem stick. And I find these are much more stable in the water, the wire stems as well. So there you go. That shows you what stick floats are like and what valve rubbers you can use to grip them. Well, there you are. You've seen some of the stick floats I'm going to be using. I'll probably just stick to one today because I'm going to be on a small, very narrow stream, and that's the sort of place that's ideally suited, providing the pace of the current is right, for stick float fishing. I won't be taking my big box of loose and damaged floats. Make sure they're all individually clipped downward if you do put them in a float box and you really do get into float fishing, and it is fascinating trying to use all the different types of floats. Let's get down to the river and see if I can't actually catch something for you using the stick float method. What's very true about those stick floats, and you can see the difference between the different tips of the floats that you can use. So I've come down to give it a shot. I'm going to be using regular fixed ball reel, 5-pound line, a light hook link because this gets pretty well thrashed this stretch of river, and it's pushing a little bit, but I think it's actually dropping, and that's good conditions. I'm using on this particular day, 2 hours, what totally awesome alike, a wire stem stick float there. It takes just 1 BB and about, I don't know, I think about number 8 there. I've got that about 4 inches in the hook, so it just keeps that maggot down near the bottom, trundling on, which is, if it trundles along the bottom, that's where I want most of the food to go. The weed's going to have died back. I can actually get a nice long trot up, and I'm going to show you, when you're trotting down, you can either let it run through or you can hold it back, but you can't hold it back as hard as you could do, say, a full-bodied Avon float. The rod is a 13-foot match rod that I purchased for £1 from the skip, and I varnished it all, sanded it down and varnished it with a matte finish varnish, so there's no flash. And I've stripped all the cork down, so I do like cork handles. I've sanded all that down with a fine sandpaper, and fingers crossed I get to get a few fish. It has yet to receive any fish on it, by me anyway. I don't know about the guy that threw it away. I'm in this urban area with all the graffiti on the wall behind me. I feel it might be beneficial to move from this place before it gets dark. But I'm going to give it a couple of hours, see if I can pick a fish or two up. If not, I'm going to go up into the park area. I'm going to start by feeding some small balls of ground bait in, and say don't do little and often. Feeding in the winter, I think it's a load of rubbish. Give it to them big time. regularly, certainly regularly, not great big massive balls, but just keep it going in regularly, because let's face it, all gets washed down the river, and if these fish don't get it, another one will. And then when I trot down with the float, I just throw in half a dozen maggots right in front of the float, then cast into it and try and keep the float going down in that bunch of maggots as best you can. You should never neglect looking at small streams, especially in the winter time, because this is when the weed dies back. All the overgrown bushes, the shrubs, the trees, they've got no leaves on them, and of course you get that high contrast between shade, as you can see under the bridge here on the right, and the light shiny colour. So it's always fairly difficult with low light conditions in the winter. The sun goes around quite low and it makes it reflective. But if you look for the darker areas, slightly deeper areas, doesn't have to be really that much deeper. If you were having, let's say, 18 inches of water in a depth in a small river, then something that's 2 feet is actually a deeper channel. And that's the channel you want to feed up with like soft balls of ground bait. Now they say don't do anything but little and often, but I don't really adhere to that, because in a river, as soon as it hits in the water, it's starting to break up. Now, you can squeeze ground bait hard to make it sink and stay in one spot on the bottom, or you can just damp it lightly and squeeze it, just squeeze it so it can break up on impact. And then I follow up with a real wussy girl's throw there. As you see, a real girly throw, like throwing left-handed. It's really embarrassing when you throw left-handed. If you're right-handed, you feel a complete ninny. But there you are, throw out the maggots, loose feed after the ground bait, or you can, in fact, you can put it in amongst the ground bait. Now this one I did off the bridge there, just so you can see that slightly harder squeezed ball of ground bait. That will sink to the bottom, but just look at all the particles breaking up here. They're sinking, they're going away down in the current, so you've got some on the bottom there, maybe a barbel or a chub for feed up, and that's what maggots look like in slow motion. A real machine gun of maggots going in there, and you can actually see the clarity here. The weed has died back, that I'm up on a bridge, 10 foot, 12 feet up on a bridge, and I can still zoom in and see those maggots. So in clear water like this, there's absolutely no trouble with a fish seeing maggots there. If you just squeeze those ground bait balls a little bit softer, look how it puffs out, it breaks up and carries off downstream. So that's going to work downstream for maybe 10, 20 or 30 yards all the way, giving you different swims to fish. Well, the first fish of the session is not exactly a monster. Look at this one. Answers on a postcard? Yes, the humble minnow. Is it Britain's smallest fish? The answer is no. You think it was. Smallest sort of catchable fish, really. That took double maggots, and that's quite a big minnow actually, quite a big minnow. The stickleback is actually smaller. So that is something to catch, amusing, and an excellent perch bait. Not perch fishing today, so I'm going to get it back. Now with stick float fishing, you can see you need to shot the float and pip it right down, so you just see that little piece of red there, and I'm holding back. You can just see a little bit of wake off the float there where I'm holding back, and what that does is let the bait trundle downstream first before the float. So if you're in very shallow water, you just might want to hold that float back, leaving a little V on the surface like that, so the fish don't see the float before they see the bait. The alternative method is to let it run through in slightly deeper water. You might have to mend the line. You'll see me mend the line in a moment. You just pick it up, it'll have a belly in it between the float, and here it comes. I just mend the line once, I only move the float once, and then you let it continue with your bail arm when you reel open, letting it run down unhindered as much as possible. There was the bite. Now for maggots, you can just hook 2 maggots on, leave the hook showing, or you can actually do it like I do it and just pop it straight over the eye of the hook with the first one, and then a double up on a second one. If you use very light line, you might want to find you get what we call spin. The maggot will actually spin up, and what you can do then, here we go, is put a caster on, and that gives you Yeah, a bit of contrast as well. And don't forget, these casters are the flies that are, you know, get towards the stage of hatching out, but there's more air inside that caster case, and that might make it sink a little bit slower. Just another little tip, a totally awesome tip. And of course, casters are very, very good for chub as well. So just show you that again. Just use the very, very tip of that tip of that hook, pop it through, and just leave it hanging on the edge, nice and straight like that. And that shouldn't spin too much. It's only on the retrieve when you wind back that you do occasionally get problems with spinning up. And of course, now you can use micro swivels as well to stop that effect of spinning. So once you've got your float there, throw the ground bait in, follow through with the float. If you can, as soon as possible, so the float you can see on the far bank there is almost in the circle of the ground bait that I've thrown in. So there goes your ground bait. It's nice and loose. It doesn't matter if it's not in exactly the same place each time, because in the winter the fish will move around, and then you swing the float out and get it absolutely plumb like that. Your bait, your hook bait, is going down in amongst the casters, in amongst the maggots, worms, whatever you want to use for hook bait. Get it down at the same time. Now obviously I don't put a ball this size in every single drop down, but I'll probably put one in every dozen or 15 casts, and then each cast I definitely put in 6, 8 or 10 maggots and follow up with the float. So you don't have to fish over the back like this, you fish wherever that deeper channel is. What you're looking for is a slight change in depth, and then you can loose feed the maggots and of course follow up with your float. Get it right in the middle if you can, and hopefully those fish, be it chub, dace, whatever they are, roach, you know, they're not going to see the difference between the loose offerings going down and all the free stuff. Make sure you keep in contact by just lightly brushing your finger over the top of the lip of the spool as you let that float go down. The youngsters especially, they might strike and not realise you can actually strike by, if the float goes down, pinching your finger, trapping the line on the spool, hooking the fish, and then after you've hooked the fish you close the bail arm. There's a pause. If you try and close the bail arm and then strike, very often with faster biting fish like dace, roach, then you're going to miss the fish. So just keep that finger on the lip of the spool as you go down, let the line off in little fits and starts like that, and then only close it when you want to bring it back, or whether, you know, when you're going to hopefully strike into a fish. Now this gentleman down there fishing below me was also doing exactly the same thing. Now you can see his stick float, he's actually using a centre pin, and he's under constant pressure, constant contact with that float, fishing all the time. You can just see he's just holding it back because you see a bit of wake coming off that float every now and then where you stay in contact with it. Guys, fish on, that shows you keeping that stick float really light does actually work. Guessing it's something like a dace or a small chub. Good scrap on a light rod there. I think it's a little wild brown trout. Yeah, he's digging away. It's a little brownie. Oh, was a little brownie, came off. Take my word for it. Well, I've lost that brown trout, but I've come downstream, following that feed down, as I said earlier, where you start at the top of the fishery and then you work your way down. I think I've got another brown trout. Let's see if I can keep this one on. When you're fishing in the winter and you're fishing for dace, roach, chub, whatever's out there, you're eventually, if you're on chalk stream and clear water fishing, going to get nailed by the trout. They really are a pretty gullible species when it comes to free offerings going down the river. And of course, out of season, you've got to put these straight back. No, I have no problem with that because I don't eat fish really. Oh yes, success in every totally awesome stick float package. A beautiful, and this folks is a wild brown trout. Look at the tail on it. Absolutely, you could cut that with a pair of scissors. That is not a stocky, that's a wild river fish here. What a result. Lost one small one, got an even bigger one. Do you know what? That stick float method definitely works. There's another fish, guys. I don't know if it's a chub this time. Coming in very steady. Normally those trout being wild are all over the place. No, it's actually another trout. Oh, he's come off again. Oh no. Trout 2, Graeme 1. Got another fish on, guys. It's another brown trout. It's about 6 or 8 packed up, just starting to suck the maggots down. It's a nice fish, another nice fish. Wildy, here he comes. This one went all the way upstream. Generally when you lose them when they go downstream like this, you're pulling the hook out their mouth, so I'm going to net this one. Here comes the rain, guys. Just what I didn't need with the camera out. Now this fish is going well. Look at that one. On the stick float. Wild brownie. Does it get any better than that, as the saying goes? The answer is probably not, because it's tipping down with rain. Let's get him back. I love it, I do. Next trot down. Just held that stick float just back a little bit. I'm on again, it's definitely not a trout, much slower type of fight. And on this match rod, which I renovated for £1 from the local refuse dump. Here comes the fish. Got to net it for all things. I think it's a roach. It's actually a chunky dace. Well, well, well. That's not bad dace, is it, that one? The maggot just in the end of the mouth there. Nice fish. Get it straight back. Fantastic action you can get using just a match rod and a regular small fixed ball reel. Using a stick float, wow, I could do it all winter long, right throughout the winter. I love river fishing. Here you can see beautiful markings on a wild trout. These aren't stocked, they're all wild. And on a small river like this, you can get chub. There's a very big chub to 4 pounds in this particular stretch of river. Now you wouldn't know it looking at it, you think there's hardly anything in there. But once you get that regularity of feed going in, with ground bait, I'm using, it's a horse feed called Bailey's No. 1, and they use it for sick or injured horses or ones they just want to boost up a bit, and I mix that, I don't know, about 75-25 with ground bait. You can mix it up as to what you want, but the main thing is just damp it. Don't overwet the ground bait, it'll just break up, and don't squeeze it too hard. You just want it to puff out and float down and and get all those fish into a feeding frenzy. Big dace this time, guys. This one really is a chunky one. It's another one to the stick float, and it is, my goodness me, this one is as fat as a barrel. I still thought it was a roach, to be honest. It's so fat, it's got that deep belly to it. Lovely fish, good condition. Let's get it straight back. One last look. That is a really good dace, to be honest. Really nice dace. Beautiful fish. Try and lift this dace, guys. It's a piggy. It's a piggy. Look at the size of these dace. And that's the sort of sport you can have on a stick float. Get out there, give it a go, and you get fish like this. Not all the time, but when you get them feeding, it's really good, exciting fishing. Now here's a totally awesome tip for you guys. If you're striking even with a wide valve rubber band to hold the top and you're losing your depth, in other words the float is slipping and sliding, don't be afraid to go through this bottom eye twice with your main line. Not with the hook link, which is down below this shot, and that way that'll stop it sliding down when you strike if your valve rubber's not enough. Alternately, you can put a second valve rubber in black further down here, so you can do top and bottom. This is a wire stem stick, so you can't really get a fine enough piece of valve rubber on the end of that one, but if you had a standard stick float, you can indeed put a piece of valve rubber there and do top and bottom. It stops it slipping on the strike. Just another tip. And kids, if you get a fish that's swallowed the bait, get yourself one of these plastic disgorgers, which you just slide over the line like this, push it down gently until you feel the hook, and then you just pop it out like that. Now how simple is that? A plastic disgorger, and the fish goes back unharmed. But there you go, guys. I can't seem to get away from him. Yet another small wild trout drops off. Let's get him up for you. And that's really nice to see. Nice healthy river. So get yourself out there, do a bit of stick float fishing, pull your fish back, even trout. If you want to eat trout, especially wild ones, I suggest going to a put and take still water, and that's the way to get some rainbows. These wild fish like that, they're under threat anyway from everything, so nice to put them back. So stick float fishing, match rod, light tackle, in the winter, it's a thing to do, and it's another skill and another, well, let's face it, it's another bow to your arrow in fishing. Good luck with it, and thanks for watching the Totally Awesome Fishing Show.